The night was silent. Above the Earth, space looked calm and peaceful. But on Earth, something big was happening. In a small control room, lights were still on, screens were glowing, people were waiting. A man stood quietly near the window. He was a scientist. His eyes were tired, but his mind was awake. He looked at the sky and whispered, "Space is not silent, it is watching us." This story does not start with rockets, it starts with fear. It starts with pressure. It starts with a desperate call. Many years ago, space became more than science. Space became power. The country that controls space controls the future. One nation had money, one nation had technology, another nation had dreams. In America, space had already become a symbol of pride. Big rockets, big missions, big success. People believed space belonged to them. But far away in another part of the world, a different story was growing. In India, space science was not easy. There was no big budget. There were no luxury labs. There was only belief. The scientist in the control room remembered those early days. Small rooms, old machines, big hopes. People laughed at them. Some said, "You are dreaming too big." Some said, "Space is not for you," but they did not stop. Then came the moment that changed everything. One night, a phone rang. It was not a normal call. It was urgent. It was desperate. On the other side of the call, a voice said, "We are behind. We need to move faster." The world was changing. Satellites were becoming weapons. Information was becoming power. If they failed now, they would lose everything. The scientist closed his eyes. He knew the truth. This was not just a mission. This was survival. In another country, another control room was busy too. Bigger screens, more people, more confidence. They had done this before. Moon, Mars, deep space for them. Space was routine, but routine can be dangerous. While one side was comfortable, the other side was hungry. The desperate call was not about fear alone. It was about time. Time was running out. Satellites were falling. Technology was moving fast. The race had started again, but this race was different. This was not about who reaches space first. This was about who stays there. The scientist picked up the phone again. He called his team. "No excuses," he said calmly. "Try again tonight." The team looked at each other. Some were scared, some were tired, but no one said no. Outside, the sky was dark. But inside the room, hope was alive. They worked all night, hands shaking, eyes burning. Every small error felt like disaster. Every sound made hearts beat faster. In the silence of space, one mistake can end everything. Hours passed. Then suddenly an alarm sound filled the room. Everyone froze. The screen showed a warning. Something was wrong. The scientist took a deep breath. This was the moment. If they failed now, the world would never trust them again. On the other side of the world, another team was watching too. They did not expect this. They believed they were alone at the top, but the desperate call had changed the game. It had awakened something powerful, not money, not machines, but determination. The scientist slowly spoke, "Fix it, we don't stop." Seconds felt like minutes, minutes felt like hours. Then suddenly the warning disappeared. The room stayed silent. No one smiled, not yet, because they knew this was only the beginning. Above Earth, the satellite moved quietly. No sound, no light, but its journey carried a message. The space race was alive again, and this time it was not about pride. It was about proving one thing: even with less, even with limits, a desperate call can change history. And somewhere in the dark sky, space was still watching. The rocket was gone. It had disappeared into the dark sky, but the story was far from over. Inside the control room, no one celebrated, not yet. Faces were still serious, hands were still shaking, screens were still watched closely. In space missions, silence after launch is often more dangerous than noise. Every second mattered. The rocket was now far above Earth. No human eyes could see it. Only signals told the truth. If even one signal stopped, the mission would be dead. A scientist whispered, "Stay with us." Far away in another part of the world, lights were also on. Another control room, bigger screens, more people, more power. They were not launching anything tonight. They were watching. Tracking systems followed the rocket's path. Data was analyzed in real time. Experts leaned forward. They did not expect much. "This is a small mission," one of them said calmly. "Low budget, limited technology." But still, they were watching. Because sometimes small things create big surprises. Back in the first control room, tension returned. A small delay appeared on the screen, just 1 second, but in space, 1 second can mean disaster. Signal lags, someone said, "Check communication." Heartbeats became louder again. The rocket was still moving, speed was stable, but communication was weak. The team had prepared for this moment. Still, preparation does not remove fear. Silence filled the room. Then the signal came back. Clear, strong, relief spread slowly, but no one smiled. Not yet. This mission was different. It was not about reaching space for the first time. It was not about testing a rocket. It was about proving a point. That smart thinking could beat heavy money. That discipline could beat comfort. That belief could beat doubt. Years ago, space exploration was only for rich nations. Big rockets, big budgets, big headlines. Others were told to wait, to learn, follow, but this team chose a different path. They chose patience. They worked silently, slowly, carefully, while the world looked elsewhere. Inside the rocket, systems were working perfectly. Engines burned fuel with precision. Navigation followed exact commands. Everything looked normal, too normal. In space, normal is never trusted. Engine cutoff was approaching. If this failed, the mission would fall back to Earth like a broken dream. The countdown began again. 30 seconds. 20 eyes did not blink. 10 engine cutoff confirmed. The rocket stopped firing. Now it was floating. Orbit achieved. For a moment no one reacted. Then one engineer slowly stood up. "It's in orbit," he said. The room exploded. Claps, tears, smiles, quiet laughter. Some people hugged. Some just sat down, exhausted. But the senior scientist raised his hand. "Calm down," he said. "This is only step one." And he was right. Because space is not impressed by success. It tests again and again. The mission's real goal was still ahead. Far away, the watchers took notice. "This was clean," someone said. "Very clean. Data showed efficiency, accuracy, control." They did not say it loudly, but they felt it. Respect. News slowly reached the world. No dramatic headlines, no loud celebrations, just facts. A successful launch, a stable orbit, a careful mission. But experts understood the meaning. This was not luck, this was skill. Back in the control room, night turned into morning. Tired faces, red eyes, but strong focus. Next phase was coming. More commands, more risk, more pressure. The team knew something important. If they failed now, no one would remember the launch. Only the result matters in space. The phone rang again, another call. This time the voice was different, calmer, proud. "You did well," the voice said, "but the world is watching now." The line went silent. The scientist looked at his team. "They are watching us," he said, "every move." No one replied. They did not need to. They already knew. High above Earth, the spacecraft moved quietly. Below, two powers looked up at the same sky, one with confidence, one with hunger, and somewhere between them, the future of the space race was changing. Success is heavy. Many people think success brings happiness, but in space missions, success brings pressure. After the launch in orbit, the team did not feel relaxed. Instead, they felt watched by the world, watched by rivals, watched by history. One mistake now would erase everything. Morning light entered the control room. Some scientists had not slept for more than 30 hours. Faces were tired, but eyes were sharp. Space does not forgive carelessness. The spacecraft was moving exactly as planned, but the next command was dangerous, very dangerous. This mission needed perfect timing. If the command was sent too early, the spacecraft could lose balance. If sent too late, fuel would be wasted, and fuel in space is life. The team checked calculations again and again and again. In another country, experts were still watching. They compared numbers, speed, fuel usage, trajectory. They noticed something strange. "This mission is too efficient," one expert said. "They are saving fuel." Others nodded. Saving fuel meant planning far ahead. Saving fuel meant intelligence, and intelligence is the most dangerous weapon in space. Back in the control room, silence returned. The next phase was about to begin. This was not launch, this was not orbit, this was control, true control. The senior scientist looked at the main screen. His voice was calm, but his mind was racing. "This command will decide everything," he said. "If we fail, the mission will slowly die." No one argued. Everyone knew the truth. Years of effort were now reduced to a few lines of code. A young engineer hesitated before pressing the key. His finger stopped for 1 second. That second felt endless. Then he pressed it. The command was sent. The spacecraft responded. Slowly, carefully, data started flowing in. Numbers appeared, graphs moved, signals stayed strong, but something was off. Fuel consumption was slightly higher than expected. Not much, but enough to create fear. A quiet fear. If fuel continued to burn like this, future steps would be at risk. No one panicked. Panic destroys missions. They adjusted calculations, they changed angles, they reduced speed. Minutes passed, fuel stabilized. A silent victory, but victory was still far away. Outside the control room, media started asking questions. Is this mission better than others? Can low-budget missions compete with big agencies? Is this a new space power? The team did not answer. They had no time. Space does not care about interviews. Inside the spacecraft, systems were heating up. The sun was stronger here, radiation was higher, temperatures changed quickly, thermal control systems were tested. Again, efficiency showed. The spacecraft survived. In the watching control room far away, respect slowly turned into concern. "They are doing more with less," someone said. "That changes everything. Because if space became affordable, power would shift. And power never likes to shift." Back on Earth, the senior scientist finally sat down. For the first time, he allowed himself to think. He remembered the early days, old buildings, second-hand equipment, doubt everywhere. People said, "You cannot compete." But here they were competing. Still, danger remained. The biggest challenge was coming, a maneuver that required absolute precision. One wrong move could send the spacecraft into endless space, lost forever. The team prepared. Simulations ran, checks repeated. Silence deepened. This was the moment where legends are born or buried. The countdown started again, not loud, not dramatic, quiet. 5, 4, everyone held their breath. 3, the command was sent. 2, the spacecraft turned. 1, data paused, no signal, no movement, just empty screens. Fear hit like ice. "Signal lost," someone said softly. Seconds passed, 10 seconds, 20 too long. Then a signal returned, weak, but alive. The spacecraft had completed the maneuver. Fuel usage was perfect. Trajectory was correct. The room did not cheer. They smiled quietly because they knew something important. They were no longer beginners, they were players. Far above Earth, the spacecraft continued its journey. Far below, the world was slowly realizing something. This was not a lucky mission. This was a warning. Night returned, not just outside the control room, but inside every mind. The spacecraft was alive, but danger was closer than ever. After the successful maneuver, everyone expected relief. But space never follows expectations. A new problem appeared, slow, silent, invisible. One screen showed unusual data, very small, almost harmless, but in space missions, small problems grow fast. A junior engineer noticed it first. He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowed. "This reading is not normal," he said quietly. Others looked. Silence spread again. Power levels were dropping, not fast, not dramatic, but steady, like a slow leak in a sinking ship. The room changed instantly. Chairs moved closer, voices lowered, eyes sharpened. If power dropped too much, communication would die, and without communication, the spacecraft would be alone. Forever. The senior scientist stood up. "Check the solar panels," he said. "Check everything." Commands were sent, the spacecraft responded. But the data was confusing. Solar panels were working, but not fully. Something was blocking them. Fear entered the room. What if it's damaged? What if something broke? What if we cannot fix it? No one said these words out loud, but everyone felt them. Far away, the watchers noticed it too. Power fluctuation, reduced efficiency. They leaned forward. "Now we will see," one of them said. "This is where experience matters." Back in the control room, time slowed. The spacecraft was rotating slowly. Its position was wrong. The sun's light was not hitting the panels correctly. A simple problem, a deadly one. To fix it, the spacecraft had to turn, but turning meant using fuel, and fuel was already limited. If they turned too much, the mission would die later. If they did not turn, it would die now. There was no perfect choice, only risk. The scientist closed his eyes for a second. He remembered past failures, explosions. Silence after signal loss, headlines full of blame. He opened his eyes. "We will adjust slowly," he said, very slowly. The command was prepared. Everyone knew this move would be remembered forever, as genius or as a mistake. The command was sent. Nothing happened. 10 seconds passed, 20, still nothing. A drop of sweat rolled down someone's face. Then the spacecraft moved, just a little. Power levels changed, not enough. The team adjusted again. Another small command. Another wait. Minutes passed like hours. Power rose, then fell again. The spacecraft was fighting just like them. Outside the room, night became deeper. Some scientists had been awake for 2 days. Hands trembled from tiredness, but no one left. Leaving now was not an option. Then something unexpected happened. The spacecraft stabilized. Rotation slowed. Solar panels faced the sun. Power levels climbed. Green lights returned. But no one celebrated. Because damage was done. The spacecraft had lost some power capacity, not enough to fail, but enough to limit the future. The scientist spoke softly. "We survived," he said, "but the mission will be harder now." Everyone understood. Every next step would need perfection. There was no extra power left, no safety net. Far away, the watchers exchanged looks. "They survived," one said. "Yes," another replied, "but at a cost." News channels reported nothing. No one knew how close failure was. The world slept peacefully, unaware. Inside the control room, silence returned, not the calm silence, the heavy one, the silence that follows danger. One engineer finally spoke. "We almost lost it." The scientist nodded. "Yes," he said, "and we may face worse." High above Earth, the spacecraft moved quietly, scarred but alive. Below, the team learned a hard truth. Space does not care who you are. It only tests how much you can endure. And the hardest test was still coming. The world woke up late. Very late. For days, the mission moved quietly. No big headlines, no loud celebrations, just numbers, signals, and careful control. But then something changed. Data was released and experts noticed. Graphs told a strange story: low fuel use, stable control, high accuracy. This was not normal, not for a mission with limited resources. In universities, labs, and control rooms across the world, people started asking questions. How did they do this? Is this data correct? Are we missing something? They checked again. The numbers did not lie. For years, space had followed clear rules. Big money wins, big machines win, big names win. But this mission broke those rules. Quietly, in media rooms, editors argued. "This is not a big agency," one said. "But the results are big," another replied. Headlines changed tone, from jokes to curiosity to surprise. Back in the control room, the team stayed focused. They did not watch the news. They did not read messages. They knew one thing: attention is dangerous. The spacecraft continued its journey. Every move was slow, every command was careful. Power was still limited after the damage. One wrong decision could end everything. The team worked like surgeons, precise, calm, silent. Then came the announcement. An international conference, experts from many countries, mission data discussed openly. This was the moment the world would judge. Screens lit up, charts appeared. Silence filled the room, then applause, not loud, not emotional, professional, respectful. A senior expert spoke. "This mission shows something important," he said. "Efficiency matters more than size." Another added, "Cost is no longer a barrier to space." Those words hit hard because space was not just science. Space was power, and power was shifting. In another control room far away, faces were serious, no smiles, no jokes. They replayed the mission timeline again and again. They searched for mistakes, they found none. "This is a problem," someone said, not anger, not fear, concern. Back with the team, the scientist listened to the conference quietly. He did not smile, he knew respect brings pressure. Because once you are respected, you are challenged. Messages started arriving. Invitations, requests, questions. "How did you do it? Can we work together? What is your next mission?" The scientist turned off his phone. Later, he said, "Finish the mission first." High above Earth, the spacecraft entered a critical phase, a long operation, hours of control, no room for error. Fatigue returned, eyes burned, hands slowed, but minds stayed sharp. The world was watching now, not to cheer, but to measure. During the operation, a small error appeared. Very small, a timing mismatch. The team corrected it in seconds, but somewhere far away, someone noticed. They fixed it fast, an observer said, very fast. Speed like that comes from experience or intense training or both. Respect slowly changed into something else. Unease. Back in the control room, the operation completed. The spacecraft was safe. Again. For the first time, the scientist allowed himself to smile, just a little. He looked at his team. "Remember this moment," he said. "It will not come again." They nodded, they understood. This was the turning point. The world no longer laughed, the world no longer ignored. The world started comparing, and comparison creates competition. In newsrooms, a new phrase appeared, a new space era. Not led by size, not led by money, but by thinking. Far above Earth, the spacecraft moved on, silent, efficient, unimpressed by attention below. The space race had changed shape, not louder, sharper, and one truth became clear. This was no longer a surprise mission. This was a warning. There are two ways to reach the sky. One way is power, the other is purpose. For decades, space followed one path: bigger rockets, bigger teams, bigger budgets. Success was loud, failures were hidden, and leadership felt permanent. But now another path was visible, quieter, smarter, patient, and that made many people uncomfortable. In one part of the world, a massive control center stood tall. Screens covered entire walls. Hundreds of experts worked in shifts. Everything was advanced, everything was polished. Here, space was treated like an empire, precise, strong, dominant. They had reached the moon, they had built stations, they had history, but history can become heavy. In another part of the world, a smaller control room continued its work. No luxury, no giant screens, just focus. Here, space was treated like a challenge. Careful, disciplined, hungry. They did not talk about dominance, they talked about solutions. Two philosophies, two mindsets. One believed in overwhelming force, the other believed in efficiency, and both were now heading toward the same future. Experts around the world started comparing, not officially, not openly, but quietly. Charts were drawn, costs were listed, results were measured, and a pattern appeared. The smaller team was not faster. They were not stronger, they were cleaner, less waste, less risk, more control. Every move had a reason. In the larger control center, meetings became serious. New questions were asked. Why does it cost us so much? Can we reduce complexity? Are we doing too much? These questions were dangerous because they challenged tradition. Tradition does not like to be challenged. Back with the smaller team, there was no celebration, no pride, just planning. They knew attention would bring pressure, and pressure breaks weak systems, so they stayed quiet. The spacecraft continued its journey, slow, stable, unbothered. Each successful step increased confidence, but also increased expectations. Soon, comparisons reached the public. Social media argued, news debated, experts disagreed. Some said big missions need big power. Others replied, smart missions need smart planning. The debate grew, but inside the control rooms, there was no debate, only preparation. The larger agency announced new plans, bigger missions, bolder goals. Return to the moon. Beyond, it was a statement, a reminder. The smaller team listened quietly. They did not respond, they did not announce, they kept working. This silence was misunderstood. Some thought it was fear, others thought it was limitation, but silence was their strength. Inside the spacecraft, systems were aging. Radiation, heat, and time were testing every component. This was expected. What mattered was response, and the response was precise. Somewhere far away, analysts noticed. They adapt quickly. One said, they don't panic. That kind of calm comes from discipline. The race was no longer about firsts, it was about sustainability. Who could last longer, who could repeat success, who could make space normal. And that scared people, because if space became normal, power would be shared. Back on Earth, the senior scientist spoke to his team. "We are not here to prove anything," he said. "We are here to learn. Learning lasts longer than winning." The team nodded. They understood something important. The race was not against others, it was against limits. High above Earth, the spacecraft passed into darkness, then back into sunlight again and again, like the future itself. Two paths continued toward the same sky, one loud, one quiet, one confident, one patient. And the sky did not care. It would test both equally. Because in space, only one thing matters, not who you are, but how you think. And the next challenge would test that thinking like never before. The future does not arrive loudly, it arrives quietly. High above Earth, the spacecraft continued its journey. It had already done what many thought was impossible, but success in space is not a finish line. It is an invitation to go further. Back on Earth, conversations changed. They were no longer about this mission alone, they were about what comes next. The moon, Mars, and beyond. For years the moon was seen as history, a place already visited, a story already told. But now the moon felt new again, not as a symbol, but as a step. In large meeting rooms plans were discussed, permanent bases, long missions, human return. The moon was no longer a destination. It was a doorway in smaller rooms. Quieter discussions happened. How can we do this safely? How can we do this sustainably? How can we avoid mistakes? The questions were different, but the goal was the same. Mars stood further away, cold, red, silent. It was not waiting, it was challenging. Reaching Mars was not about bravery alone, it was about patience. Months of travel, limited supplies, no quick rescue. Mars does not forgive excitement, it rewards preparation. Experts around the world understood this. Technology alone was not enough. Humans needed systems that could survive, not just rockets, but thinking. Back in the control room, the senior scientist looked at a large image of Earth, a small blue dot. So fragile, he said quietly. Space made Earth look small, and humanity even smaller. This changed something. The race was no longer just about who reaches first. It was about who returns safely, who learns, who protects. The spacecraft sent back more data, not dramatic, not exciting, but valuable, data that would help future missions, data that would save lives. This mission was becoming a teacher, not a trophy. In media rooms the tone softened, less competition, more curiosity. People asked new questions. Should countries work together? Can space unite instead of divide? What is the real goal? But rivalry did not disappear, it only matured. Quiet competition is stronger than loud rivalry. New plans were announced, moon missions, Mars tests, robotic explorers. Each announcement was a message. We are not stopping. Back with the smaller team, there was no announcement, no press event, just work. They focused on reliability, one system at a time, one lesson at a time. They knew something important. The future belongs to those who last. Inside the spacecraft, time passed, radiation hit, systems aged. And yet it survived. That survival mattered more than speed. Somewhere else, analysts noticed the pattern. They designed for endurance, one said. That's rare. Endurance is not exciting, but it is powerful. As discussions about Mars grew, reality set in. Mars would not be won by ego, it would be earned by discipline. The idea of humans on another planet changed how people thought. Borders felt smaller. Arguments felt weaker. Space had that effect. The senior scientist addressed his team. We are not building missions, he said. We are building trust. Trust in machines, trust in people, trust in the future. The team listened. They were not heroes, they were builders. High above Earth, the spacecraft entered a long silence period. Communication paused. It was expected, but silence always feels dangerous. Minutes passed. Then a signal returned, soft, stable, still there. That small signal carried a big message. Humanity was learning, slowly, carefully. The future was no longer a dream, it was a plan, a risky one, a fragile one, but real. And somewhere between the moon and Mars, the next footprint was waiting, not for the strongest, but for the wisest. Every race has a finish line, but space does not. High above Earth, the spacecraft kept moving. It did not know about debates, pride, or rivalry. It followed commands, it followed physics, it followed truth. Below, humans search for meaning. For years, people asked one simple question: who will win the space race? It was asked in newsrooms, it was asked in classrooms, it was asked in control rooms, but the question was wrong. Winning space is not like winning a game. There is no trophy, no final whistle, no last mission. Space is endless. The senior scientist stood alone in the control room. Most screens were dark now. The mission was stable. There was nothing urgent. For the first time in weeks, silence felt peaceful. He looked at the image of Earth again. Small, bright, alone. He remembered the beginning, the desperate call, the fear, the doubt, moments where everything could have ended, moments no one outside ever knew. The mission did not make them rich, it did not make them famous, but it changed something deeper. It changed how people thought. Across the world, space agencies adjusted their plans, not because they lost, but because they learned. They learned that cost matters, they learned that patience matters, they learned that ego is heavy in space. The race slowed, not because people stopped, but because they became careful. The spacecraft sent its final major data package. Systems were aging now, power was limited, its job was almost done, and it had done it well. Engineers saved the data, analysts studied it, students learned from it. The mission became a reference, a quiet one, in public talks. The senior scientist was asked again, who is winning the space race? He paused before answering, then he said, space is not a racetrack, it is a classroom. That answer surprised many, but it was true. Every mission teaches, every failure warns, every success humbles. The moon was still there, Mars was still far away, nothing had changed in space. Everything had changed on Earth. Countries talked more, shared more, planned together, not always, not perfectly, but more than before. The idea of cooperation felt stronger now, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. One night, long after the mission headlines faded, a child looked at the sky. He did not think about budgets. He did not think about rivalry. He thought about possibility. That was the real success. The spacecraft entered a long silence. Communication would stop soon. It would become another quiet object in space. Not dead, just resting. The team gathered one last time. No speeches, no cameras, just a quiet moment. We did our part, someone said. Yes, the scientist replied, and now others will do theirs. Space would continue to test humanity with radiation, with distance, with danger, but also with perspective. From space, borders disappear. From space, arguments feel small. From space, Earth looks shared. That is why space matters, not because it can be owned, but because it reminds humans they are together. The space race did not end. It evolved from competition to understanding. There was no final winner, and that was the point, because the real victory was not reaching space. It was learning how to move forward without leaving humanity behind.